of artificial intelligence is what it's going to do to the internet itself.
We become so used to generated information, and that generated information has been diluted or it has been changed in order to fit an agenda or a narrative. Super dangerous place.
People where there was a huge talent shortage. Remember, skills-based hiring really got a huge momentum push on the 2021 boom type era where actually you couldn't hire anybody. Everyone was competing, salaries going through the roof. You have to find an ideological reason not to just go with the same people. We're going to enter a world where AI-enabled candidates will be the norm, and I don't think that recruitment processes that were designed pre-AI are going to cope with it.
Hung, welcome. Great to have you on the show, buddy.
My pleasure, Sam. Having you as host makes me feel very safe and welcome, fella.
How the tables turn. It'd be brilliant for anybody listening who doesn't already know who you are, or I imagine most people will. Just brief introduction, who you are, what you do.
Sure. So my name's Hung Lee. I still self-identify as a recruiter. So I used to work in recruitment agency, 10 years. Switched in-house, did a lot of rapid growth, 0 to 50 type of tech startup growth. I launched my own tech company. At one point, a competitor to Hacker Jobs. I remember meeting Mark early on, and we were neck and neck at that time. He obviously went ahead and did a much better job as a CEO of a business. And my attempt to kind of recover my business led me down to do Brain Food, which is basically a content related play. And these days I write a newsletter, curate community, I do webinars, podcasts, events, and what have you. I see my job as totally different now. It's about sort of just talking to the TA and HR ecosystem and doing what I can to make sure that information is flowing in the right places and that ecosystem is healthy.
Yeah, awesome. And it gives you such an amazing viewpoint, the ability to just zoom out and take stock of what's going on. And, obviously you have fascinating people on your show and lots of awesome content. And, we'll really look to drill into that today. And I think one of the things, last time I was on your show, we were talking about AI, about, 9-10 months ago. And it was certainly that moment where things were moving, it was really starting to happen, it was becoming a lot more kind of constant in people's conversations, and the implications for recruitment at TA, like we often do, right? We see the next big thing and then we focus on what's its impact on recruitment TA. And I think the thinking at the time was very much, well, this is a very different moment in history. This isn't just the next fad. But I'd love to get your take now, many months on, like where you see AI today, where you see AI tomorrow, like maybe beyond recruitment.
Yeah, it's, obviously it's endlessly fascinating. And we're all speculating kind of as best we can. No one can be very confident in their predictions. But having sort of said that caveat, happy to speculate away, because I think we do need to project forward and have a look at what the implications are. For me, one of the more interesting implications of the widespread adoption of artificial intelligence is what it's going to do to the internet itself. So we've been living in a kind of an internet that really since Google sort of emerged to kind of index the internet, our experience of it has generally been you're going to go through a single sort of interface, a search engine, almost always going to be Google. You're going to type something into an input box, and that's going to retrieve information back at you that already existed prior to your input. So it's an information retrieval process, and it'll present you a page of blue links that you then go and click. And obviously, that's still how we think of exploring the internet and doing search. And we can criticize whether it's a good or bad thing that we've experienced, and obviously SEO and ads and all that have really degraded that search experience. That's a secondary issue to what I think AI is going to do to that experience in general, because if generated information starts replacing retrieved information, that has huge implications as to what we do in recruitment. If we are starting to switch to a ChatGPT for our information, and there's lots of evidence that we are starting to use these tools ahead of Google to get our results, because they do provision or provide what feels like a better result faster. You ask Google something
Yep.
and it'll give you a list of ads, firstly, and then it'll give you a bunch of links that have been SEO'd up, so they will distract you from where you want it to go. And it might take you a couple of clicks and a couple of dead ends before you get the information. And then you'd probably end up hitting a paywall as well when you get there. So it's quite a
Mhm.
frustrating experience to do a search. Now, using a tool that is sort of like ChatGPT produces you a text output or an image output or a video output that actually looks what it is that you expected when you made your input. But that hasn't been retrieved. That's been generated more or less on the fly by that particular AI. Now that is really, really interesting. A couple of reasons. Number one, it means that you're not clicking those links anymore, and therefore you're not visiting websites. You're
Yep.
staying within the generated experience. Now, if we expect a collapse of web traffic, then okay, that's the ad model kind of disappearing. And anybody who's building a property that's hoping to draw eyeballs towards you, probably that's a bad idea. No amount of SEO, no amount of ad spend is going to be effective in driving traffic to your website if people start significantly moving towards generative experiences more than the retrieval experiences. Now, all of this may be completely marginal, other than the fact Google itself has rolled out its own search generative experience. So if Google is starting to do
Yep.
it, you can kind of imagine what that's going to look like. So for folks who don't know, search generative experience is Google's version of generating information on the fly, text-based response, generated, not retrieved. And I think that's going to have a significant impact to people dropping away from clicking on other links. So that means that the web will be starved of traffic. Huge implications with job advertising, career pages, job search. What is even job search in this type of world? Who knows? And this is a cascade effect. So in other words, if companies realize, oh, we're not getting sufficiently good traffic on our website, maybe we should stop publishing jobs there. You might have a kind of a vicious flywheel emerge where people aren't going to publish jobs that way, and we have to find a new way to connect job seekers with job opportunities.
Yeah, and I think there's so much truth in that kind of retrieval versus generation piece. I think the other part though that I'd challenge is actually, are we still going to be making that cognizant effect when we're thinking about purchases, right? You can't go and buy a bag or a laptop or something when you're, through generative AI. You're generating knowledge, right? You're generating an answer to a question. And I think that's going to be the same for jobs personally for some time. Is like, actually, if you're looking for a job, you're still going to search for the job. You're still going to do your research. You're still going to engage with it. You might augment that experience and get a bit more context and color and flavor from generative AI and probably help you in the process. But like, I think that's still the aptitude and the ability to go and search and look for your own things will be really, really important. What's your thoughts on like generative AI in the hands of job seekers? Because I think that's the other part of this. Actually, is it creating more traffic? Is it creating more challenges?
Yeah, it's creating more noise for sure. So yeah, maybe the web traffic doesn't necessarily disappear, but the signal to noise ratio will be completely skewed. So I've been monitoring candidate use of AI for a little while, mainly because the first examples of generative AI were actually candidate sort of tools. If you remember, like
Yeah.
18 months or so ago, before ChatGPT kind of mainstreamed the idea, you had a load of developers producing, little tools that were kind of designed to get them through recruitment and application processes. And they were jocular examples of the technology. I don't think they were seriously using it for finding work. It was just, it seemed like an obvious application, and they went ahead and did it to demo the tech. But that kind of switched on my interest straight away. And it was obviously inevitable that these things would, in fact, be turned into tools that people would use. Now, there's some kind of interesting debates as to whether how real a lot of these products are, or how effective, mass supply is, or how effective is, do these things actually generate the sort of the thing that they promise, meaning, can you apply to 1,000 jobs and write a personalized application per job that will completely mask the fact that it's AI generated. I don't know whether the technology is there at the moment for this, but it seems that it will be at some point. This
Yeah.
doesn't seem particularly difficult. Particularly when you look at the core capabilities of what this generation of generative AI does, which is ingest a lot of text and then be able to respond to that text. So we're going to enter a world where AI enabled candidates will be the norm. And I
Yep.
don't think that recruitment processes that were designed pre AI are going to cope with it. We need to have a real redesign of how we do assessment, collection of information, and what we do with that information. All of that needs to be rethought in this AI-enabled candidate world.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we're doing a certain amount here of crystal balling, right, and predicting, and it's a very difficult task. And I think the one thing which we can be sure of is we've moved from 18 months ago. You put a text prompt in, and you can generate a odd looking image which doesn't really look like a human being or doesn't really look like the thing that you're putting in. And then you look now, and we're putting in text and generating, Hollywood grade video production, right, within the course of 18 months. So I think your point there on actually, candidates using generative AI, or recruiters using generative AI, or anybody in the working world using generative AI, it's like, well, we're here now, but actually the pace and the scale that we're moving at, hey, we need to consistently crystal ball because it's moving faster than tech has moved before.
No, I was going to say the crystal ball needs to be part of the process. I mean, unfortunately, we have to do gazing in there because, we can't wait for the innovation to hit us and then react. We have to anticipate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like, let's talk more broadly, because I love this kind of framing of like implications on the internet as opposed to implications just for recruitment. But when you think about search, when you think about traffic, when you think about jobs, like, well, is there anything else that you see from the implications of the internet that then we can apply into TA recruitment talent?
One of the things that's really interesting is that data owners or companies that own proprietary data, they may now have a completely different set of incentives than they did pre-AI. So before the existence of AI, essentially, if you had a lot of data in your system, you're a social network, for instance, it would make sense for you to open up your a social network to Google because you want the discovery, you want the traffic. You want more people to join your site, you want more people to visit it, you want to be one of the top 100 sites or whatever it is. That's the thing you wanted to do. But with generative AI arriving, suddenly that openness becomes a high risk for you because it means that companies that aren't Google and that aren't you, a complete third party, might be able to simply scrape all of your data, train an AI with it, and then produce some value that would otherwise should be, they'll basically capture the value that should actually be yours. So we noticed early that companies like Reddit started stopping crawling, Stack Overflow stopped it. Twitter obviously stopped it. And now LinkedIn has started to prevent Google from indexing a lot of the key parts of information of a user profile. And that caused a huge scandal within the sourcing community because actually a lot of sources relied on finding LinkedIn data from Google rather than from within platform on LinkedIn. Obviously that for cost reasons, but also maybe even for efficiency reasons, because LinkedIn's internal search is really quite mercurial. It doesn't actually always give you what it is that it should. So a lot of the most highly skilled recruiters actually use Google to what they call X-ray LinkedIn, look for LinkedIn data off platform. Now, that seems to have been significantly compromised by LinkedIn basically restricting significant parts of a user profile's information, things like the about segment or the experience segment. These are critical for a recruiter to get a hold of. They apparently no longer appear on Google X-ray search. So what does that future look like? It basically means if every organization that has proprietary data now thinks, actually, we don't want the search traffic, we don't want the ads. We're going to shift to controlling our own data. And we're going to train our own AI on it, and then we're going to charge our subscribers to use that AI. That's how we're going to sort of become the next revenue model. We're shifting from an ad-driven world to a subscription-driven world. And the way I've kind of positioned this, or imagined it from a user perspective, it's like going from an avatar-like world of abundance, where everywhere there's life and everywhere there's opportunity. You simply have to go around and look for it, and it's right there. Instead, we're going to go to a Mad Max style dystopia where it's just an arid desert, and we'll occasionally encounter a heavily defended city, because you know what? Only the people inside the city get the water and the good stuff. People on the outside have to beg for it or somehow infiltrate it or get in. And of course, on the outside, I think that's going to be entirely populated with bots and AI generated information. So from a dystopic point of view, it might well be a hellscape whereby if you're not within a world city talking to other human beings, all you can ever do is encounter all of these AI generated avatars that you can't identify whether they're real or not. And you're just wandering around, probably not getting any value and probably being at risk of getting a value extracted from you by your interactions with these things. So yeah, the world's going to change. I don't think necessarily for a better way. Man Max is a tougher world than Avatar. But I think this is the way we're inevitably going.
It'd be interesting. I remember there was a tool a while back called Generate. I'm sure it was Generate, a search engine where your data was then basically paying you back when other data processors were using your information. That could be a really interesting juxtaposition in this for like these kind of data capitals, highly defended forts. Actually, is the end user able to benefit from this at all? Like, does that give them access to, their own subscription because their data is being used, or is there a way of generating revenue from it? There's probably something there. Your metaphor far better than mine. I was thinking of like 7 or 8 subscription channels all running at once, and all of the media houses all creating their own as it is, and applying that in the world of the internet. But I prefer your dystopian Mad Max versus the abundance of Avatar for sure. So I think a lot of what we've spoken about so far, we've been thinking almost falling into the trap, right? So we spoke, and there was this thing, years ago, they asked thousands of children, what is the internet? The high proportion of them just said Google, right? And we get into this motion of when we talk about things, when we talk about a Hoover, or when we talk about getting an Uber, and it becomes an action. And a lot of the kind of conversation around generative AI has been on ChatGPT, right? It's like it's the default. Yeah, you just go to ChatGPT. But let's talk about Google, and let's talk about big tech's response. I think we were speaking before. You had some great examples of maybe where things can go a bit awry when we're thinking about generated information versus retrieved information. So yeah, I'd love to dig into it.
Well, I mean, the obvious issue is being Google Gemini 1.5. I mean, that was released 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I can't remember. So very recently. By the way, this is happening in sort of 4th of March. So we're talking about sort of end of Feb. Firstly, everyone was amazed. It was a great PR win because, Google Gemini 1.5, apparently was an LLM trained, to, 10 million tokens or something like this, which is, times 10 at the next competitor. Everyone thought it's just going to be so much better than ChatGPT, etc. But even that achievement was very quickly overwhelmed in the public consciousness by really a peripheral product that they released alongside that, which was essentially their image generator. And their image generator essentially seemed to produce absurd kind of responses to explicit inquiries. And the absurd responses were obviously designed to ensure diverse representation in image generation. If we rewind back sort of a year ago, one of the classic critiques, probably a classic now, critiques of generative AI was that it was biased, quote unquote. because you would type in, show me an image of doctors, and it would all be men. Show me an image of nurses, it would all be women. And everyone was up in arms in that and thinking, okay, this is really bad because actually there are women doctors and actually they're male sort of nurses. So can we have more of that representation in these generated artifacts? Now, it appears what happens here is that Google has, in fact, took that advice on board and kind of written code to ensure the production of diversity from these generated images. And it was a really good example of where, I think positive motivation can sometimes lead to negative outputs. Because what happened, of course, internet users would play with this and try and break the system. Is that Google seemed to refuse to produce an image that included only white men, for instance, even when the prompt really required it. So, for instance, I may be able to say things like, very famously, show me an image of German soldiers in 1945. And it would, I think it produced an image of a black man and a Chinese woman in Nazi uniform. Do you know what I mean? It was like, okay, I mean, we get that you want to produce diversity, but we can clearly see that that was not the case. Overwhelmingly, if I was trying to retrieve information on non-AI and I typed in that Google search, I would generate an image, probably a grainy image, of white men in uniform. Because, 99.999% of all soldiers in the Wehrmacht were white men. So that should be the output. And people just experimented even further, show me a picture of Vikings or whatever. And it would, produce ethnicities and genders that, simply were absurd. And that obviously became an outrage simply because it seemed to be impossible to generate an image of a white man. It's like white men simply hard-coded out of this future. And that's obviously dangerous. Like, how we actually, what are we actually saying with this? And of course, it was the scandal was so bad that actually Google pulled back that image generator over time, and Sundar Pichai had to come out with a mea culpa on this and explain it was terrible and we're going to fix it and all this type of stuff. And now, of course, we're at the stage now where we're forensically examining, Google's culture that allowed this to happen, and it's fallen very quickly into, the US culture war on woke and all this type of stuff. So unpleasantness ensues, but the underlying challenge of generative AI is actually there. Like, what is actually a good output from generative AI? Does it make, even now it's quite hard to answer, because if I said, show me a picture of a doctor, I think, yes, it needs to be accurate to what doctors are now today. I don't want to see a 5-year-old there. That's not a doctor, it's a child. At the same time, representation is important. We know that actually people don't see images of people that look and be like them. Then that can actually discourage them from imagining that that's a possible future for them. So the ethics of this are needing to be unpicked. This is new territory for us, of course, and this is an example, by the way, of how technology innovation, that is genuine innovation, meaning we've never seen it before, will trigger cultural crises, because it is so new. It'll challenge a lot of the things that we thought were that we'd built ideas and values on situations that are now changed.
And you went down the dystopian route earlier, but like, when you think about the context of this in like an Orwellian lens, actually, if we no longer have retrieved information, we're all running off generated information, and the information isn't being generated without parameters and guardrails being put up to fit with the current societal norms. Actually, history can literally rewrite itself if we become so used to generated information, and that generated information has been diluted, or it has been changed in order to fit an agenda or a narrative. Super dangerous place, right?
It is, but history's always been a rewrite. History has never been an accurate representation of what actually happened. It's a narrative written, and it's impossible to do that forensically, in my opinion. It's like saying, is it possible to be unbiased? No, it ain't. You're a human being. Biases are a part of the evolutionary path that we've gone down. Arguably, without bias, we would have never evolved. There were evolutionary adaptations, right, to help us react more quickly to a threat or opportunity. So history has always been fake. I think it's not it's a narrative. We need to move away from the concept that there is such a thing as direct access to reality. These are really difficult things to cope with, but there isn't. We have a presentation of a theory that we can have a varying degrees of confidence with, but we can't entirely trust no matter what it is. And let's not forget, media has always had a huge impact on how people think about things. I remember this very well when I was in Scotland in sort of the age myself now, but when I was in Scotland, late 80s, late 90s, should I say. So I was at university there, and Braveheart came out. Braveheart, one of the biggest films of all time, and obviously historically completely inaccurate. However, it was such a high impact movie, Hollywood production. It told the story in a certain way. And there's no question, if people were starting to, if you ask people now, oh, what happened during that period, they're going to start reciting what happened as a result of the Braveheart script, not as a result of some dusty tome that the historian wrote. In the same way, right? Was very famously, it was early last year, I think it was Jada Pinkett Smith or something was playing Cleopatra, and this kind of created another sort of scandal because what did Cleopatra actually look like? Was she a black woman? Was she a Greek woman or whatever? And you could go. This is a living debate in the US. You could go to the US and you could ask a bunch of people the ethnicity of Cleopatra, and you'll get confused responses. And I think largely because of the impact of Hollywood, now with YouTube, TikTok, and now AI generated YouTube and TikTok. Yeah, we ain't got a chance.
And so I agree, and I definitely think it's like media portrayal and history's written by the winners, all of these things. But I think the difference is when you're retrieving information, and I do love that framing, thus retrieve, first generate. When you're retrieving it, you're able to ascertain and put your own view of, okay, how much conviction have I got based on the information in front of me that this is the answer. Whereas with generated information, it's, well, this is the answer. And I've got such confidence that this is the answer because the computational power is so large. The access to information is that much greater than I could possibly have. And it's easier, right? I think that's the other part. It's so much easier to just go, what's the answer to this? Brilliant. In fact, could you write that with 500 more characters? Or can you write this in this other language or whatever else? And it shoots out again an answer that, even if not entirely accurate, feels entirely plausible. I think that's the challenge, right? And that's the bit where we've got to be careful because we're unable to then put our critique on it.
You're 100% correct. I mean, the presentation, the confidence of the output is astonishing. And that was actually one of the very early and valid criticisms of this. What is the degree of confidence? An AI output is extremely confident. It'll declare things to be absolutely the case, and even things that are factually incorrect. So, we may well be heading down a world where this is part of the reason why I really want to see a polyphonic world, a multipolar AI, if you like, because I think one of the ways in which we could solve this is simply have lots of different AIs out there where we can kind of at least cross-reference what the AI outputs might be. Now, most of us probably won't do that in the same way we don't we don't compare news reports from different countries, for instance. None of us do this. It's pragmatically too difficult. But the very existence of the possibility that there's tools out there, I think it simply helps us. And it kind of maybe helps challenge our own sort of gullibility. Because if we're presented with contradictory outputs from AI, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just a reminder that this thing is simply outputting data based on that maybe a different set of data and based on parameters that it's being sort of driven by, and also increasingly driven by your own sort of behavior. So if it learns your behavior and what you like to click on, and we're giving, by the way, feedback to the AI, And is our feedback accurate? Probably not. Let's say I really want to believe that William Wallace was this type of person, and it produces information that's factually accurate, but I don't like this because it challenges my narrative, and I downvote that accurate response. I'm training the AI to basically continue to lie to me because it wants to please me. So yeah, I mean, we're not immune from responsibility from this. I think what we need, and this is where we kind of move into, really a sociological type of view. We kind of really need an elevated sense of consciousness, and should I say, a maturation with our relationship with knowledge. So in other words, right now we're kind of childlike in the sense that we're wandering around looking for daddy to tell us what's true, or mummy to tell us what's true, right? And whatever comes out of the mouth of daddy and mummy is definitely true. And I tell you what, you lose your childhood or you start growing up in life when you realize your mum and dad actually sometimes say things that aren't true, or they don't know. Everyone remembers that moment where shocking realization, oh my goodness, mama is not infallible. She's totally wrong on this, right? Everyone goes through that and you start growing up. Now, we need to have a similar journey at a societal level when it comes to all kinds of produced information. So for too long, we've been looking at produced information, be it from newspapers, governments, or wherever it is, and just assume that's true. And we're actually appalled when it isn't. That's why we lambast these institutions for either making mistakes or even deliberately lying to us. We hammer them for it. But I think our emotional response, a negative emotional response of them either lying to us or getting it wrong, is itself an example of immaturity. It sounds like being outraged at your mum for not being right on everything. Stop being outraged at her. She's not going to be right at everything. And it's the same thing with the governments and with media publishers and everyone else. It's like everyone is just guessing with different degrees of competence, with different agendas. And we need to get comfortable with the fact that all produced information we have can't fully be trusted. And we simply have to pick our way through it as best we can. That's an uncomfortable reality to us. But I think if we kind of accept that the only truth is that we can't know the truth, I think we'll be in a happier place. You can get to a psychic calm on that. It doesn't have to be
ignorance is bliss.
It's not ignorance. Well, ignorance is bliss. You can totally ignore this and just keep farming. I think that's one way to do it. Just ignore it all. Unplug and ignore. I think that's a totally legit way of doing it. But the way in which I'm trying to do it, whilst keeping sane, is not to say you should give up on the pursuit of what's true, but understand that truth is on a spectrum. It's like, some things may be more or less true based on this continua. And what we've got to do is try and figure out as best we can what the most likely situation is. And maybe, based on perspectives and different stakeholders, contradictory things may both be true because we might be looking at the same problem in a different way. So being able to handle, I think, ambiguity, and then not having that freezing your capability of thinking or operating in the world is going to be a really important skill in this AI, dominated media landscape that we're about to enter.
And I like that kind of spectrum of truth, and playing within that. I think it's a wonderful philosophical framing from you, but it's almost that concept of truthiness as well. Sometimes these problems, sometimes these answers, sometimes these solutions are so big and so vast and almost seem implausible that they no longer feel true. And I think that's a whole nother range of challenges, because people are getting access to information that previously, in that kind of retrieval world, you'd be looking, you'd research it, but maybe it's a couple of grades above your knowledge level within that particular domain. So you're unable to research pragmatically and get to an answer, and you're not able to get that answer. And actually, does that even feel that can possibly be true? Is the other piece. And then the last part, I think, before that, we were talking about almost aggregating AI, taking, hey, we've got 12 different AI sources. Let's give them all the same answer and aggregate a response. Robot Wars. Let's just hope it's hosted by Craig Charles, because he needs another run out on that. But I love that. I love that thinking, and I love the kind of idea around it. And it's almost a different way of retrieving information, right? Aggregating the information that's shot out to you. And if you zoom out again, when you're talking about these kind of walled cities of data, well, one AI source might have access, i.e., Microsoft, LinkedIn in our world, versus another AI source that in time might have access to their own user data on Google Play and the Android ecosystem versus Apple and its ecosystem. Like all of a sudden, all of these different data points might become increasingly gated, and then the AI is then built its models of information which other models don't have access to. Will we see governments come in and have their own AI-led pieces? I know there was a great example at a conference last week with HMRC, right, of people practically using generative AI. And if it's possible at that level, it might be possible, more broadly, or it certainly will be, in time. And I think that other piece is governance. In a commercial role for the first time, when I'm looking at big master service agreements and things, it's now one of those annexes in the documents when you're talking about AI. So that kind of governance, ethical kind of play within it, fascinating. So I love those 2 points: the spectrum of truth, and like almost aggregating AI and responses. Switch pace again, and this is it's a momentous year for the world. Half the world are going to election. Again, it feels like a crystal balling with a lot of this stuff, but I love crystal balling with you. You're a natural philosopher. The macro, like what's happening in the world, where do we see impact there on recruitment, resourcing, TA? What do you see just generally in the world? Not, we're putting the world to rights here with 35 minutes so far, and it could be another half an hour. It's not going to be enough to cover it all, but cliff notes.
All right, cliff notes, speculation. It is an extraordinary year in terms of elections. I think 40% of the globe are actually voting for new governments and so on. How this impacts us in recruitment, I think is generally positive, because what happens is governments who are incumbents will just do a giveaway. They'll do a tax giveaway in order to present, hey, we're in charge, we're doing great, come and do this. And all of the hard decisions are typically made in year 2 and 3 of a political term. So there's going to be some sugar to the crowd, right? So we're going to get a sugar rush economically, and that may lead to a little bit more of a, I'm not even call it recovery, because the sugar is not going to be good for you, but it will give us an economic boost. That's the plan in any way. It's part of the reason why, if you look at the US, it's why the Fed Reserve started to crank up the interest rates 18 months or so ago. That was in anticipation of 2024. So you could start then cutting the rates. It was trying to solve the inflation problem 2 years before, do the pain then, and then hopefully inflation comes down, and then you can give your incumbent president sort of a 9-month runway of constantly banging on about how amazing things are. The same thing happens in every country, but particularly important in the US, given the fact that the decision making of the amount of dollars in the world affects everyone on the planet. That's why all of us tipped into recession, is because those interest rates sucked out dollars out of our economies and back into the US. So all of those things impact us. So the giveaways are going to happen this year. This will give us a little bit of positive plus, I think, maybe a couple more people get hired, etc. However, it's not straightforward, because there's lots of reinflationary things that have occurred that are not helping the plan, so to say. We didn't realize that actually, the Houthis in Yemen would shut down trade through the Red Sea, at least for US flagged and Israeli flagged and UK flagged vessels. That's going to have a knock-on effect on inflation. We see the United States is going to ban Chinese EVs. Another example. That's going to have a massive inflationary effect. So basically, we've lived in since the early 1990s. We've lived in a globalizing world, a world that was constantly globalizing. What that meant is more connections, more people plugged in, global marketplace, cheaper goods. All of those things were happening in that globalizing era. Now, we're in an era now where I call hostile deglobalization. So in other words, we've decided to deglobalize. At least not we. I didn't have any choice in this. A few people, a small coterie of individuals have decided deglobalization is the way forward. That's inherently inflationary. It's basically saying, we're not going to trade with you anymore. We're going to do it all ourselves. Okay, great. Doing it all ourselves basically is going to cost more than trading with people who've already done it. Therefore, that's going to make things cost more. So we have this kind of reversal of globalization is going to increase the cost of living. That will generate cost of living crisis, continued cost of living crisis, and in fact, it's going to make things extremely tough for different parts of society. There's another thing as well that we need to bear in mind. No matter whether you're a globalizer or a deglobalizer, whether that's plus or minus is really dependent on your position in the economy. Right. It doesn't universally affect other people. Typically, the very rich people typically have a great time during recessions because they can swoop in and buy distressed assets at discount pricing, which we are in fact seeing in recruitment tech. Let's bring it back to our industry, recruitment tech. There's going to be loads of consolidations go on. Why? There's discount bargain basement time. There's going to be lots of companies that basically don't like the look of this next market and think, I need out. They're going to be selling it on at a far lower cost than they would have done in 2021. So the big boys, the ones that can survive, these ups and downs, they're the ones that are going to think, okay, great, now's the time I can just pick up a couple of great companies for a start.
Yeah. Weather the storm. And I think, so much of what you say is correct there. And it's interesting, and I think we always have this lens of almost privilege when we think about macroeconomic effects and inflationary impacts in our markets versus inflationary impacts in other markets, and it's obviously a lot more pronounced in certain communities, and something we need to be really cognizant and mindful of. I think that last part, actually, when you think about tools within our space, bring it back to recruitment. I think the other part, which we touched on earlier, the kind of LinkedIn X-ray search, again, that kind of gated data. There's a whole cohort of technologies that rely on open source data to enrich their product and enrich their kind of offering for market. So, and that's going to be another interesting discourse. I don't know if you've got views on that, thoughts on that, how they might evolve, change.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a product maker out there that hasn't got AI core to their roadmap, right? So there's another thing that's this has done is really re-energized software developers. I mean, I remember just looking at what previously might have been very jaded CTOs and founders, suddenly like little kids again, because I thought, wow, we can suddenly do all these things. So I think the bottom line is tooling is going to get significantly better. It's going to get significantly cheaper as well because the software development cost has gone down for the value that you could otherwise provide. So we're going to get a step change quality improvement in the tooling that we have. That also means that we're going to see companies that are going to expand from core products because now it's like basically cheaper to try and do that. So I've noticed that a lot of point solutions are now building ATS-like functionality and even just rolling out straight ATSs. That makes perfect sense because the ATS is the last product that a TA person is going to switch out. It's too important. You typically keep an ATS for several years. It's not just a 12-month in review type of situation. Too important. Your business operations are running on it. Or at least TA's business operations are running on it. So point solutions, I think, I've looked at this and thought, you know what, we need to make our product stickier. We need to diversify our revenue. And now it's actually quite easy to build an ATS that's very compelling. Let's roll this out and see whether we can onboard as many of our point solution customers to it, and then keep them as solid customers through whatever the market throws at us.
And it works on both sides, right? If you look at all of the SaaS metrics, if you've got a 4 to 7 product solution, you're going to be far more sticky. You're going to have much better net revenue retention, generally going to last longer as an organization, have higher order values. And then from a customer's perspective, well, look, if I can get more things done in a single platform, reduce that kind of software fatigue, then it works for them as well. It's just, I think, where the challenge was years ago, without the enablement of faster deployment of tech, is you'd have point solutions trying to do something else, the secondary solution not being anywhere near as good as their original point solution, and they'd be lambasted then for the add-on. And there's obviously big players within our space that were other tools that added in recruitment modules and would regularly be lambasted for it. as opposed to, kind of now where it is much more possible to create something meaningful. If you've got the right people, right customers, you're having the right conversations, you can produce something that has that impact. Another area, right? So here's where we're switching pace again, or I'm switching pace. We're not. I want to switch pace and kind of look at something else, because the thing from a conference commentator, both of us in a way have been commentators for a number of years now in our own kind of view of the market and being able to zoom out a little bit. And one of the things which we always used to speak about at recruitment events, 4 or 5 years ago, it was coming up. It was skills-based hiring. We're going to be hiring for skills, not roles, and this whole kind of myriad and world around it. That's certainly resurfacing, and kind of many commentators and many people within the space say, well, look, generative AI is going to enable this. Changing world of work is, now is the time to look at it. But I'd love to get your view on skills-based hiring. Again, cliff notes, but I'd love to kind of get a bit of a sense.
So I've been a skeptic of this, and not because I'm inherently against. I think the concept is great. I just doubt I think the cost of implementation has been underrated. And also, what does it even mean to implement? So, for instance, listen, credentialism is basically what skills-based hiring is trying to, it's trying to attack the idea that, this person must be great because they've worked for this company, brand name company, et cetera, or this person must be brilliant because they've come from this university or whatever. And we know that's not the case. Isn't it better for us to just kind of break down this individual in terms of the competencies or skills they have, and then recruit purely based on that rather than credentialism? Not only does this support expanding the labor pool, therefore increasing a diverse pipeline into your organization, but it also helps recruit in people where there was a huge talent shortage. Remember, skills-based hiring really kind of got a huge momentum push on the 2021 boom type era, where actually you couldn't hire anybody. Everyone was competing, salaries going through the roof. You had to find an ideological reason not to just go with the same people. So the ideological kind of buttressing that we use was, okay, we're going to do skills-based hiring now. So actually that expands the talent pool. We can look at other people. And final value of it is not only skills-based hiring, but translating that into a skills-based organization. So in other words, suddenly we, instead of having people that are walking around with job titles in bold font, we're actually looking at individuals that have an aggregate, a collection of skills that we can now more easily move around a business. So this unlocks internal hiring and so forth. So all of these things, philosophically, I'm 100% pro, but I think on this, it's just devil in the detail type of situation. Is it applicable in every case? And what are the problems involved in actually moving towards skills-based hiring? I think that's been underrated. It reminds me a little bit of the great charge to remote in the 2020s, where remote was, hey, this is a miracle, everyone's going to go remote. And I was thinking, you know what, that's kind of great, but have you thought about the implications of this? And have you paid any attention to people who've tried this I encountered problems? So it reminds me a little bit of that, where we've just we've been overly quick in achieving consensus that skills-based hiring is the way to go, and we underrate the implementation difficulties of getting there. And I think what the outcome is going to be is that a lot of companies are simply going to eliminate experience and are going to basically anonymize CVs at the front end, and then just call out skills-based hiring and say that they're there. I think it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more chewy to be done on. But I'm prepared to be educated. I'm doing a few shows on this because I'm interested myself in figuring this out. So going to get a lot of experts in to help educate me on that.
Yeah, and I think that's it's definitely the play. And I think it's almost, again, it's that one mantra that just isn't true. And there'll be organizations where this will work. There'll be organizations where it won't. And we're inherently a kind of skills sourcing platform is one of the things which we pride ourselves on. But actually, the taxonomy and the interplay between the different skills and your application of those skills, it's a whole other kettle of fish. And actually, how can we structure organizations when they've long been structured in a way that doesn't support skills-based hiring. I think this is going to be one of those ones, a bit like that kind of utopia of total talent management and the overall visibility of your workforce, of your organization, and the ability to solve problems with this, deep and intricate knowledge. Things are just moving too fast, would be my sense, for that to be true constantly. And the challenges and change management, if you think about some of the big thinkers within that space, again, it's the biggest blocker and hurdle, even if philosophically and theoretically it feels like the right play. And then take that, zoom out again, and think about the kind of nature of globalization. Well, if we're moving to skills-based primarily, then hey, pockets of the world that maybe have lower salaries and there's a cost arbitrage, there's going to be a rebalancing of wages when it's attached to skills, and surge pricing for skills globally or internally within organizations. It's going to be a really interesting kind of dichotomy to unpick and unravel, and we'll have again further implications on kind of the world and the world of work. So yeah, where do we go there?
Further twist on this, a lot of the theories of skills-based hiring really emerged also pre-AI, pre-generative AI. So we have an additional variable thrown into this. Like we're talking about skills-based hiring, that's great. What kind of skills? Are those skills AI insulated? You can set up a system where you're hiring for all these skills and actually a bot can do it all, or a bot will be able to do it. Are we thinking about along those lines? No, we're not. So it's interesting to think about skills-based hiring, skills-based organizations. A lot of the great examples really occurred before AI, and it's now going in parallel. And I just think, okay, those things are quite interesting because it's evident that generative AI is going to displace a lot of different activities and in fact make a lot of skills redundant. So if that's the case, then how do we do that? Do we constantly have to monitor what skills that we're recruiting for doing purely skills-based hiring? The answer's got to be yes, but again, that adds additional complexity to already a difficult task.
And I think, if you add then the complexity of enterprise organizations with, 120 territories and 200,000 people, and then the complexity of the industry that they're operating in, it's going to take, some pretty smart people or very high levels of computational power to then, map out what is actually needed and how to apply it. And the idea that there'll be less inefficiencies, well, actually, what's your inefficiencies in making that change? And what's that impact and does it balance? And I think it then throws up a whole other host of questions on recruitment versus resourcing and how we think about problems as a TA function for our own survival. But it's been a journey that we've been on throughout the course of this podcast, mate, as ever, whenever we speak about anything. And I love to put the world to rights on a whole host of things. Let's, stick this one in the time capsule as well. We'll come back to it. We'll replay it. We'll sit down. We'll share a jar and think of this in 5 years' time. Have any of these premonitions or predictions come to light? But yeah, absolute pleasure having you on the show, buddy.
My pleasure, Sam. A great conversation. I think it's definitely something we could just keep rolling on. Again, this could roll on till we get into the pub kind of thing. So great having a chat with you, and it's useful to just exercise the mental muscle there, and more conversations this type. Let's keep having them. We've got to keep debating all of these things.
Yeah, this is it. For those of you who aren't watching, check out Brain Food every Friday. Sign into the newsletter up there because we need to keep conversations. We need to keep looking forward. We need to bring in people with different perspectives and different views because the world is changing and it's changing fast. And this is definitely one of those aha moments and moment of change, as opposed to innovation branded. This is innovation reality. So awesome, dude. Great having you on, and we'll see you soon, no doubt.
Great.